Smart Drivers, Rick with Smart Drive Test talking to you today about what to expect at truck driving school. When you go to trucking school and you're working towards your CDL license for a bus or truck driver, what are you going to expect in terms of the curriculum? How hard is it going to be? How much learning will you have to do? And those types of things. So we're going to talk about that today and give you a bit more information about that. Stick around. We'll be right back with that information. Hi there, Smart Drivers. Welcome back. Rick with Smart Drive Test talking to you today about truck driving school, changing careers, starting a new job as a truck or bus driver. Because if you go to trucking school, it's not just becoming a truck driver, but also becoming a bus driver. And Corey's here, Lisa's here. Corey is the moderator. He keeps all the bad people out who like to spam live streams. I don't think they have anything better to do other than go around on YouTube. A little bit like sub for sub. But anyway, yeah, and I'll answer other questions too if other people are here as well about getting a road test. Now, the first thing I want to say about going to truck driving school is that all the car stuff is applicable to driving a higher class vehicle. So you have to go back, for those of you who haven't reviewed any of the handbooks or manuals on class 5 stuff, you have to know all of the right-of-way rules. You have to know where the stopping positions are at stop signed intersections, how to handle complex intersections, turning, and those types of things, because getting a commercial license is simply class 5 plus plus, depending on what you're doing. So that's what you need to do. So that's the first thing that I want to tell you. And I would also say that in terms of trucking school and going to trucking school, becoming a bus driver or a truck driver, that 70% of what you're going to learn is car stuff. It's exactly car stuff. And I've been in the truck with students, some of them who think that they're experienced. They had a truck and trailer and they were pulling that around and thought that they were doing all right in terms of driving. And had one student in particular who comes to mind who I asked to make a right-hand turn at a traffic light. The traffic light was red and he just went around the corner. And of course, a little bit to my surprise, I kind of just started laughing, and he asked me what I was laughing about, and I said, well, when you come to a traffic light, you didn't do that right. He said, what do you mean I didn't do that right? He says, I can turn right on a red light. I said, yes, you can, but you have to come to a complete stop first at the correct position. And what had happened with this particular student is that he didn't come in and take driver training. He came in and took a lesson before his road test and then went for his road test thinking that he didn't have to have driver training. Well, by the time he got done and got his truck license, he spent 3 times as much as he would have if he had just come in and taken 4 or 5 lessons and gone and done the test. And so sometimes it's better to just go to the trucking school and get them to teach you how to pass the road test, even though you have previous experience, because even though you have previous experience, that doesn't mean that you have the experience that you need to pass the road test, because that's a different animal. And I'll tell you that right now for some of you who may have access to equipment, that you can't just climb in the truck, drive it, get it around the city, and then go and book a road test and do the road test. It's not going to be successful for you. All right, so Tim, my friend, how are you? Lisa, I wanted to thank you on your video. I passed my G2 test yesterday. That is awesome, Lisa. Thanks for stopping by and letting us know. Congratulations. Any road trips booked, Lisa, in celebration of that? Marty, they asked me, anyone who has free time clean up around the property, so I got a bit of a brown recluse spider and up in the hospital. I went to trucking school. Wow, that's quite the story. Joel, what should I pay attention to when writing the learner's license permit for Class 1 in BC? As I just said, Joel, all of the Class 5 stuff is applicable to the higher class license. So make sure that you're up on your Class 5 stuff as well as your Class 1 learners. They're going to ask you all of the stuff that's in the truck driving manual for BC, but they're also going to ask you Class 5 questions as well. So make sure you go back and study signs. You go back and study right-of-way, attitudes, left turns, right turns, driving on highways, and all of that information as well. Okay, Alex, my friend, how are you? You are most welcome, Alex, and we're going to get a new video up this week. Actually, what I'm going to do is I've got a live stream that I'm working on editing right now, and it's the founding story of Smart Drive Test, so I'm going to try and get that up this week as well for you, plus some other stuff. And of course, always check out the stories on your mobile, because I'm putting those up as well. Lisa says she's not right now, no road trip right now. Just trying to get enough hours in driving so I can get my G. Yes, and Lisa, I'm almost sure, isn't the G2 to G in Ontario? Don't you have to be in that stage for 2 years? Just I'd have to double check that. Saba, hello Rick. I have to thank you for your informative videos, which helped me pass my G2 yesterday. God bless you. And that is awesome. Simply awesome. Okay, Saba, that's really great. And Corey is ahead of me here in terms of answering the question about learner's license for Class 1. There is a lot of information in this video as well about passing a learner's test for your Class 1 as well. And anybody who's, and that's a good point as well, anybody who's going for a CDL license, going to trucking school, you have to get a learner's. It's the same thing as going for your first license. When you get a higher class license, you also have to get a learner's license first before you can apply for trucking school. They're going to require that before you go in and apply. Alex, I failed last time my review as test, and I got a nice training. So you got a better examiner this time. That makes a big difference in terms of being successful on your road test. All right, so let's get over here and get going on the presentation. Excellent. So we'll do that. All right, so we're talking about what to expect at training school and the 5 components of truck driving school. The 5 major in-truck components are turning, shifting, pre-trip inspection, coupling, which is hooking and unhooking the trailer. You have to do that in a specific order. And then backing. And backing is going to change in terms of importance depending on which truck driving school you are at and which test center you're going to go to for your test. For example, in Ontario, when I worked there, you had to back around a right-hand corner, which is fairly straightforward. Here in Vernon, it's fairly simple. You simply have to back the truck up in a straight line for 50 feet. And in Victoria, British Columbia, where I also trained, you had to parallel park the truck, which was much, much more difficult and challenging for students to learn how to do. So it's going to depend on which test center you're going to in terms of backing the trailer and how much work that's going to be. Okay, so here we go. All right, so have a look at this playlist as well, road signs for CDL drivers, and this will be applicable to Marty, who's, nope, sorry, Marty's laid up. That's unfortunate. Okay, who asked me that? Joel asked me that, I'm sorry. Joel asked me about signs for CDL drivers. Have a look at this playlist as well. Corey will put the link up for you in the comments there, and have a look at this, and this will give you information about signs that you have to pay attention to as a CDL driver. So have a look at that. All right, so different kinds of work. So if you have some trepidation and you're still on the fence about whether you're going to go to truck driving school, you're going to get your license, you're going to invest the time, energy, and money, and we talked about this in a previous live stream, there is lots of work available. I have been supporting my university degree. I've been supporting all of the time that I went to school with driving a truck or bus. So there is work out there, and I've been in and out of the industry. I've worked as a truck driver, worked as a bus driver when I was in Australia, both full-time and part-time, and I've been able to go into the industry and come back out and make money. There's always work as a truck driver. The only truck driver that's not employed is the truck driver that doesn't want to be employed. So there's work out there. Some of it's better paying than others and better working conditions, but you once you get that 6 months, 1 year experience as a truck driver, you can basically do any job you want after that. And sometimes you're going to have to move around for 3 or 4 jobs before you actually find the job that you want. There's lots of reasons here why. Always employed, different kinds of jobs, different kind of work. Trucking is challenging. I've been in the industry for a long time now, and I'm always learning new things. And communications has changed truck driving a lot. It's broken down the isolation, so you're not as isolated as you once were, especially up until the 1990s when you were still using payphones to communicate with dispatch and communicate with your family and friends and those types of things. There is good money in truck driving compared to other jobs, and the amount of training. For example, if you wanted to be an electrician, you would have to go to school for 5 years before you could become a journeyman, before you were going to make $35 or $40 an hour. So there's going to be a lot of years working as an electrician where you're only making, as an apprentice where you're only making $22 an hour. Whereas you're going to make a lot more money than that as a truck driver once you get 1 or 2 years experience. You don't have to put in the whole 5 years experience as a truck driver. All right, so you need a license. So this is what I talked about in the introduction, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. The first thing I'm going to talk about is you're going to need to master your turning for the purposes of passing your on-road test at truck driving school. And this is unfortunately it becomes secondary to learning how to shift a non-synchronous transmission vehicle. And for the first couple, 2-3 days, the instructor is going to be giving you a lot of help about how to get the vehicle around a corner. Yeah, so because it's a much bigger vehicle and you have off tracking, and there are different schools of thinking when you go to truck driving school about turning. Some will take you out with just the tractor for the first few days, which is just the truck, the cab of the truck, and they'll get you used to shifting. I never subscribed to that teaching method. I always had truck and trailer. I wanted you to be thinking about that trailer from day one, because you have to think about the trailer. As I used to tell students when I was teaching them truck driving, the trailer drives the truck, not the truck, which is weird because the truck part of the unit can go anywhere on the roadway so long as the trailer stays in its lane. And that can be a bit daunting for the first few days when you're in truck driving school, how much off-tracking there is and how much technique and skill and ability is required to get that unit around a corner. So that's going to be the biggest thing. And that's probably going to take you a year to sort of get your head around how much space you need to get a truck and trailer around a corner, especially a 53-foot trailer. So the next component is the pre-trip inspection that you're going to have to do. Every commercial license requires a pre-trip inspection. So if you're going to go for a class 4, which is a bus less than 25 passengers, or an ambulance or 15-seater van, all of those require pre-trip inspections. So for class 4 small bus, you got 20 minutes to complete that pre-trip inspection. For bus more than 25 passengers, or a dump truck, or a class 5 or a 5-ton truck, you've got 30 minutes, and then for a tractor trailer unit, you've got 45 minutes to complete the pre-trip inspection. And part of that pre-trip inspection is doing your air brakes as well to make sure the brakes are in adjustment and they're working properly. So all of that is included in your pre-trip inspection for the purposes of your road test. And usually, in my experience, at most places where you go to do your road test, the pre-trip inspection is the first part of your license test that you're going to have to do. The next part of truck driving school is shifting and learning to shift a non-synchronous transmission. And what I'm going to say about truck driving and learning how to shift a non-synchronous transmission: yes, automatic transmissions are coming into the industry. Yes, most of the larger carriers in the United States are going to be 9 or 10 speed transmissions. Here in British Columbia and in Canada and places that have mountains are going to be running 18 speed transmissions. Automatic transmissions have not quite made it up yet to dealing with oversized loads or dealing with the mountains and the amount of work that is required by that truck to get up and down over the hills. So most of these vehicles are still going to be 18 speeds. They're still going to be 13 speeds. The 13 speeds are on their way out in favor of the 18 speeds. These transmissions weren't robust 20 years ago. Now the technology has advanced enough that most of the trucks you're going to be driving are going to be 18 speeds. The way that you tell whether you're driving a 13 speed or an 18 speed or a 15 speed for that matter, but 15 speeds are pretty much gone now, is the button is going to be red for the splitter for a 13, it's going to be blue for a 15 speed, and it's going to be gray for an 18 speed. So my point was that if you're going for a job and you get your license on an automatic vehicle, you're going to have a restriction on your license. You're not going to be able to drive non-synchronous transmissions. So spend a little bit extra time, spend the little bit of extra money to get a non-synchronous transmission. Learn how to drive a non-synchronous transmission, and you can get started here. There's a theory video that I have on shifting a 9, 10, 13, 15, 18 speed transmission. have a look at that. That will give you the fundamentals before you get into the truck. So have a look at that as well. All right, and then as I said, backing and coupling the unit. And backing is going to depend on where you're at, how difficult that's going to be. And yes, if you already have experience backing up a truck and trailer, you back up the boat trailer at the key where you launch your boat, then all of those skills are transferable. You already know how to use the mirrors. You know how to back up the trailer. So that is going to transfer to a big truck. And I tell students, if you're having trouble backing up, if you don't have those skills already, go and find somebody who has a truck and trailer and go out on the weekend, find a space where you can back around a corner or back up the trailer in a straight line, and those skills will improve your backing up when you're learning how to back up a truck and trailer, because it's going to be a little bit daunting the first couple of times you do it, and even more daunting when you start driving and you try and get that trailer into a dock, because when you get the trailer into a dock, it has to be fairly exact. All right, and then the last piece of truck driving school is going to be coupling, hooking, and unhooking the semi-trailer. There's basically three components on a semi-trailer. There's the airlines and electrical, the landing gear, or dollies as they're sometimes called, and then there is the fifth wheel pin and hookup for the fifth wheel assembly to make sure that the trailer doesn't fall off the back of the truck. Now, I have seen other drivers who've dropped trailers off the back of the truck. So one of the first things you want to do, and one of the golden rules of trucking, is every time you bang into a trailer, you get under a trailer and hook it onto the truck, make sure that you get under that truck with a flashlight and make sure the jaws are locked around the kingpin. And people are not immune to this. The truck driving school that I last worked at came in one day and it splattered all over the front page of the news. They went out of the truck driving school, they went down about 3 blocks, turned out onto the highway, and dropped the trailer on the ground. Because what happens is truck drivers get lazy, they back into the trailer, or they come back from a break and they get in the truck and they don't take the flashlight, climb under the trailer, take the 30 seconds that it takes to check the kingpin and make sure the jaws are locked around the kingpin and get back in the truck and take off. Essentially what most drivers will do is they'll back into the trailer, and then they'll hook onto it. They'll think that they hear the click, and then they'll pull on it. They'll give it a little tug, and they'll think that it's hooked onto the back of the truck. They're not absolutely 100% sure that that trailer is not hooked onto the back of the truck. The only way that you can be 100% sure is if you climb under there and have a look. So that is one of the golden rules of truck driving. Make sure that you check that pin. And I'll tell you, I never dropped a trailer on the ground. Touch wood, not yet. Because I was religious about that. It was one of my golden rules of trucking, was I always got under there with a flashlight and checked to make sure that those jaws were wrapped around the kingpin. So if you do it in a particular order of hooking up the semi-trailer in a particular order and never violate that order, you will never drop a trailer on the ground, you will never damage the landing gear, and you will never rip the airlines off, because those are what happens when you mess this up. It's easy to hook up a semi-trailer, it's easy to mess it up too, and I tell students that. So when you hook up the trailer to the truck, PDA, public displays of affection as I call it, or PDA, it was personal device something in the 90s. That doesn't work as well. Just think of public displays of affection. PDA, pin, dollies, airline. Hook it up in that order. So pin, again, you want to hook into the pin and make sure that there's no space between the trailer and the fifth wheel. You want to make sure the jaws are locked around the kingpin, and that way you know it's not going to come off and everything's locked into locking position. Pin dollies, so then you crank up the dollies, and the last piece you do is you hook on the airlines. Because if you hook on the airlines and then crank up the dollies and somebody comes along and you forget about it, what happens is now you can just get in the truck and drive away. Well, the dollies are still hanging down there, and then you bend and break the dollies on the trailer. And of course, you know, that's a few $1,000s to repair that, and they get really upset when you do those kinds of things. And then unhook is lap, 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 landing gear, airlines, pin. Do it in the same order every time, and again, you won't damage the landing gear, you won't rip the airlines off, and you won't drop the trailer on the ground. So don't violate those orders. Get it into place, all right? And then backing up, and as I said, we already talked about that part of it, so we're not going to talk about that anymore. But if you have questions, if you're watching on the replay, let me know. and I'll answer any questions you have. And Sign Cutter's here from North Dakota. He's tending CDL school to take the school the school bus course. So that's awesome, excellent. We can talk a little bit about school buses as well. All right. So the other thing about going to truck driving school, and I keep impressing this upon you, and I can't impress upon you enough. Start looking for a job even before you go to truck driving school. Call up trucking companies, call up bus companies and say, listen, I'm going to truck driving school. I'm getting my CDL license. Do you know anybody who's hiring drivers? Or are you hiring drivers? And they say yes or they say no. And if they say no, don't just hang up the phone and say, oh, thanks for your time. Say, listen, do you know anybody else who might be hiring drivers? Because this adage of you can't get a job without experience and you can't get experience without a job is very real in the trucking industry. And it's not because companies don't need drivers. They do need drivers. The reason for this is because of insurance. That's the sticking point. So you need to beg, borrow, and steal a truck. You need to beg, borrow, steal a bus, and get whatever experience you can. All right. The other thing you're going to do at truck driving school, you don't have to do this before you get there, but you have to do an air brake course. Most of these buses, even school buses in this day and age, are going to have air brakes, and you're going to have an air brake ticket in order to be able to operate that vehicle. So the unfortunate part about air brake courses is that they're 40 years old, they're tremendously out of date, and bureaucrats get involved, and they put silly numbers in for some of these tests. And it confuses everybody because there's no standardization across the board in terms of air brakes. And everybody in all 50 states, everybody in all 10 provinces and 3 territories that we have in Canada and other places in the world that are required to do air brakes think that air brakes are different. They're not. They're the same. Every place that you go, air brakes are the same. The numbers are just a little bit different. So know that for the purposes of air brakes, and Corey will put the link up for you for the air brake checklist over at the Smart Drive Test website. That will help you out because in the truck, you have to do air brake tests as part of your pre-trip inspection inside the vehicle. Those 5 tests include testing the governor, minimum and maximum pressures, testing the low air warning, testing that the emergency brakes apply automatically, doing a compressor test, which is most often called a build-up test. You have to do a leak test. So those are the 5 tests that you have to do in cab. And those numbers and those tests vary a little bit depending on state to state or province to province. However, it's the same 5 tests for every CDL license test. Again, governor, maximum and minimum settings, low air warning, visual and audible has to come on above 60. Some places are 55. And again, it's just to confuse you. Low air warning, or not low air warning, the emergency brakes have to apply automatically between 20 and 45 pounds per square inch. The build-up test, most places it's 50 to 90 pounds within 3 minutes at a high idle. The province of Ontario, again, is one of those places that does it different. It has to be 85 to 100 pounds within 2 minutes at a high idle. Same thing. Leak test. Every place, 1 minute, maximum pressure, can't lose more than 3/4, 6 pounds. So 3 pounds for a straight unit, 6 pounds for 4 pounds for truck and trailer, and 6 pounds for truck and 2 trailers. Okay, so those are the numbers. And again, if you go over and get that checklist that Corey's put up there for you, that'll help you out. And again, if you need any help with that, leave us a comment down in the comment section. If you're watching on the replay, again, go down in the comment section and leave us a comment. All right. So, more driving knowledge. We've already put up the signs. Corey put up the signs for you. Have a look at those. You're going to have to understand these at a much, much higher level. And the 2 most important signs in there, I talk about a lot of signs, but the 2 most important signs for truck drivers and CDL drivers is going to be height signs. In the United States of America, it's going to be 13.6 is going to be the maximum height of your unit. In Canada, it's 4.15 meters. So know that. The state of New York likes to be a little bit different. All kinds of things in New York that are different. New York measures from the center of the hub so that you can go under most bridges and overpasses in the state of New York that are 12 feet 6 inches. But that is the golden rule. The other piece in terms of height signs, when driving a large vehicle is that you also have to understand grade signs. You have to understand how long and how steep a hill is. And if it says 10%, what that means is that for every 100 feet that you go forward, the hill drops 10 feet. You can convert it to metric as well. For every kilometer that you go forward, the hill drops 10 meters. That's the way that you read grade signs. And if you look at the video on how to descend a steep hill, it'll give you a general formula that works most of the time for most vehicles going downhill. In a tandem truck, so 2 axles on the back of the tractor, 2 axles on the back of the trailer, less than 80,000 pounds. If the grade is less than 10%, you can go down in 5th gear, Jake brake on full, and you'll get down the hill safely without experiencing brake fade, because that's the danger of descending hills. Okay, so get it all. If you go to truck driving school, I know some of you are just going for your bus license and those types of things. It's not that much extra money, and it's not that much extra work to get your Class 1 license, your tractor trailer license. And the reason I say that, the reason I encourage students to get their Class 1 license when they go to CDL trucking school is you're much more employable when you go out and start looking for a job. Even if you want a bus license, you just want to drive for Greyhound, or you want to drive a school bus or whatnot, it's a lot easier for you to get a job if you have your tractor trailer license. I had my tractor trailer license. I was able to work all kinds of jobs, running flat deck, pulling garbage trailers, hauling vans, reefer trailers. And then when I went to Australia, I didn't want to drive truck anymore. So I went and became a bus driver with Greyhound in Australia. And Australians are fond of saying that they founded Greyhound. I never checked into that, but I keep just saying that fact anyway, just in case it's true. And I also drove for one of the regional bus lines there when I was going to university part-time. So your employability, if that's a word, is much higher if you have your tractor trailer license, even though you may never want to drive tractor trailer. So I do encourage you to consider that seriously and think about getting that license. All right, now the other thing, and I'll just talk a little bit about the job that you're going to encounter once you get out of truck driving school and you get a job and you start going to work as a bus or truck driver, is you're going to have to work with dispatch. Even if you're driving a bus, you still have to work with dispatch. You have to let them know what's going on. Okay? When you're working for Greyhound, you're going to be on a schedule. You have to keep in touch with Greyhound. If something goes wrong, dispatch is your first point of contact. And as well, you need to know when to contact dispatch. If you're driving truck and you're driving long haul, there are certain times that you have to call them. Anytime you deliver a load, anytime you pick up a load, every 24 hours, anytime there's problems, anytime that you break down, you have to contact dispatch. Dispatch's job is to coordinate available equipment and drivers with available loads. And if they don't know what you're doing, they can't do their job, and you can't do your job and keep moving up and down the road. And that's what you need to be doing, because the job of a bus or truck driver is to move people, freight, and services between point A and point B, and that's what you want to do. All right, so good luck on your road test, and remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. So I'll answer any questions that people might have here. Yes, and there are courses available over at the Smart Drive Test website, so have a look at that as well. Pipos 777. I have my CDL with my military license. What do you recommend me go to a big company or a local company? How much driving experience do you have, 777, in terms of driving in the military? Were you driving trucks and trailers when you were at the military, or do you think that you're going to need a little bit more help in terms of shoehorning you into the industry? Because if you need a little bit more help, I would recommend going to one of the bigger companies where they could put you with a mentor for a period of time, for a few weeks or whatnot, and that way it makes the transition a lot easier than you trying to figure out all of that stuff yourself, because just the paperwork as a CDL driver is a lot. And I was telling this to a friend of mine the other day, that one of the jokes are that when I went to university, when I was teaching at the university, I never had a briefcase. But when I was a truck driver, I had a briefcase. I had a briefcase for all of my paperwork, border crossing documents, logbooks, trip sheets, all of that information was in my briefcase. and I sat and filled that stuff out every day. So there is a lot of paperwork to fill out, and just working with somebody else will make that a lot easier for you. Booty, what are the major subjects for the learner's permit exam? So learner's permit exam. Now, Booty, I just want to confirm you are talking about the CDL learner's permit. Is that what you're talking about? So, North Dakota, yes, sign cutter, you were there. Epic, my friend. Speaking of commercial learner's permits, they're in range of $100 to $200 in the state of New Jersey. They cost $125, and you need to take the test within 6 months minimum, 2 to 3 weeks. Logbook training. Yes, there is logbook training. There is. When you go to truck driving school, there are going to be other courses that you're going to be taking there as well, depending on which course you sign up for. A lot of trucking schools now have gone to MELT, mandatory entry level training courses. The province of Ontario, the United States, has delayed this somewhat. There are other provinces here in Canada that have this mandatory entry level training. As part of that entry-level training, minimum entry-level training, you will be required to do logbooks, to do other compliance, what's going to be required when you go to the scale house and you get pulled into the scale house, and what they're going to be looking for in terms of an inspection on your vehicle, compliance, hours of service regulations, all of that is logbooks. Load security, they're going to be talking about load security, how to strap stuff down to a flat deck and those types of things. It's kind of interesting because even though there's a lot of emphasis in learning and going to truck driving school about load security, most of the time, unless you're running a flat deck, that is not going to be your issue. Most of the time, the shipper is going to put the freight on the back of the truck, and the shipper has a vested interest in making sure that the freight on the back of the truck doesn't move around and whatnot. And if you're running refrigerated trailers, temperature controlled trailers, or you're pulling vans, most of the time it's going to be on pallets, and it's going to be shrink wrapped on the back of the trailer. So that's what's going to happen in terms of load security. I mean, as I said, and again, for load security in terms of flat decks, if you do start pulling flat decks, and I would encourage you to consider that because there's a lot more money in pulling a flat deck. If you're hauling steel rolls, for example, you're going to chain that down with binders. If you're hauling timber on the back of the flat deck, you're going to strap that down. You may have to tarp it. Most of the time, it's not that complicated. The only time that it gets complicated on a flat deck, say, is, for example, is if you're hauling crushed cars, because now they've required those trucking companies that are hauling crushed cars to have the netting over them so that there aren't pieces falling off and those types of things. But hauling crushed cars, that's kind of a specialty work, and actually a lot of flat deck companies won't do it. But you're basically either chaining or strapping stuff down on the back of a flat deck and putting tarps over it. And, more is better. If you're unsure, more is better on the back of a flat deck. Okay, so there we go. So that's basically it for, what to expect going to truck driving school. What you're going to encounter in terms of the curriculum and whatnot, but that'll give you a good overview. So essentially, the in-truck training is going to be, you're going to do air brakes, you're going to do a pre-trip inspection, turning, driving the vehicle around town, shifting a non-synchronous transmission, and for the first few days at truck driving school, shifting a non-synchronous transmission is going to be your biggest challenge. And once you kind of get a handle on that, then you can start working on your turns. But your turns are really what is going to determine whether you're going to be successful in passing a road test or not. So you really got to get that dialed in. And driving instructors will be able to help you with that. And it's very unlikely in this day and age, it doesn't matter where you are in North America or in the world in terms of doing a trucking license. You can't just climb in a truck and think that you're able to drive that truck and then go and do a test. Excuse me. And do a test at a test center and think you're going to be successful. You're probably not. In this day and age, you have to go to a trucking school because the instructors at trucking schools teach people how to pass a road test every day. So I would really encourage you to spend, you're probably going to have to spend at least a couple $1,000, go to a truck driving school and get them to help you out. Because if you fail and you have to go back, then there's a lot of time invested and whatnot. And so, you know, I would really strongly encourage you to go to truck driving school and figure out what you need to do in terms of being successful on your road test. All right, so if you have any questions, leave us a comment down in the comment section. If you're watching on the replay, you like what you see here, give it a thumbs up. As well, consider subscribing to the channel, and all of that helps us out, and share it around on social media, and that helps us out as well. So, Epic, speaking of commercial driver's license driving schools, some states offer exceptions, a waiver from form for that, provided you served in the military and you can go directly to your CDL. That's how it's done in New Jersey. Okay, so that goes back to the question that 777 was asking about military licensing. And again, it's going to depend on what kind of experience you have. You can go and just, as Epix gave the information there, that you can just go to the DOT and do your test. But you want to make sure you're dialed in too, because there's specific things that you have to do to be successful on a road test. And it's, you know, unfortunately, it's getting tougher and tougher. So I think we'll wrap it up there. We'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much for showing up. Thank you for your questions and participating. And again, if you're watching on the replay, leave us a comment down in the comment section there. All of that helps us out. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a great day. Bye now.